I want to start this video with an important disclaimer. The question of this video does not have an answer. Giving black and white answers to a question so grey sounds foolish. I am not the parent of your child. Every situation is different and I am merely here to inform. I'd also like to point out that I do play video games, and I have done so ever since I was a child. If anyone would be biased, it would be me. Therefore, it is inevitable that my personal beliefs will bleed through from time to time. Nevertheless, I have valuable information to share on this topic as it has been extensively researched. I'll do my best to stay as concise and unbiased as possible. We value each other's time, after all. So without further ado, let's answer the question to whether it's okay for children to play video games.
Includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are
unable to walk away from online video games.
Right, I agree with you. They're violent weapons, I know what you're
raise concern over violent video games and the cultural effect.
Now, I'll start my research with a few assumptions. Firstly, I'll assume that we don't particularly care about video games specifically designed for children educational purposes. I don't have much personal experience with these games as we were far less digitalized 15 years ago as we are today. However, in recent years, with the rise of digital education, we see institutions develop games that offer, for example, math or problem-solving questions. These are essentially textbooks with identifiable rewards and pixels instead of ink. So the value of these games are clear to any parent. This also ties into my second assumption, which is that we don't particularly care for games that are designed for children in general. Games like Put Put Saves the Zoo or Pajama Sam offer much of the same as games offered in a classroom, except the fields of learning are hidden behind a veil of a fun adventure. A child wouldn't really notice this, but for a parent its value is again in plain sight. Something that's interesting to note, however, is the existence of these games in the first place. You could argue that a rise in digitalization would naturally mean a rise in digital educationary games. However, if there was a substantial amount of evidence suggesting that these games would harm a child more than they would do good, its existence would most certainly not be spread to mainstream schooling. No, what I believe we are actually here for is games as a form of entertainment, not its educationary purposes. Is it okay to let a child play Mario, Sonic, or maybe more adultery games like FIFA or Call of Duty? And if so, how much of it is okay, and why wouldn't it be okay? These are all great questions, and I would like to answer them starting from the obvious. So let's debunk a common misconception about video games, which is that video games make you violent. To debunk this claim, we first need to understand it. Games haven't been around for too long, but their popularity in today's day and age cannot be understated. The evolution of games in this time span has been quite a marvel. We went from this to this in only 24 years. Back then, we didn't really have the time to truly understand the effects of video games on the brain of a child. So from the perspective of a parent, it is understandable then that when you see your child perform not so friendly acts against not so guilty people, you'd be worried. Due to the rise of these games, it was only a matter of time for this to become a noticeable issue in mainstream news, where they mostly denounced video games as a medium that was harmful for children. All of this isn't exactly news to you and I though. What's more interesting is that actually, yes, there was research to suggest that children could develop negative traits. Taking a look at studies anywhere from 1995 to 2010 shows us several research papers which suggest video games could cause a rise in aggressive behavior, antisocial behavior, desensitization, lower empathy and other deviations from the norm. One such a case was in a paper from 2009 conducting research on young children. They found that, quote, "Our findings replicate, in many ways, the results of previous works in the identification of several negative outcomes associated with violent video gameplay. Specifically, results suggest that amount of time playing video games and exposure to violence in video games are associated with lower school performance, increased aggression, attention problems, and externalizing behavior." This paper acts as a building block on a meta-analysis done in 2001 by Anderson and Bushman. Now, their analysis gets cited a lot regarding this topic, and it is likely one of the most popular ones out there. They reference real-life examples of radical actions being influenced by the aggressor playing violent video games. To discuss their analysis, they had the following to say. These results clearly support the hypothesis that exposure to violent video games poses a public health threat to children and youth, including college-age individuals. Exposure is positively associated with heightened levels of aggression in young adults and children. Exposure is negatively associated with prosocial behavior. Furthermore, exposure is positively related to the main mechanisms underlying long-term effects on the development of aggressive personality. Finally, exposure is positively linked to aggressive affect and physiological arousal. In brief, every theoretical prediction derived from prior research was supported by the meta-analysis of currently available research on violent video games. Now, these papers aren't without their own personal biases and limitations, but with enough of these out there, it is understandable why some people could conclude that at least violent video games shouldn't be played by children. Of course, however, there is a lot of research out there suggesting the opposite. At the time, this was quite a divisive issue, even at a scientific level. My personal belief, however, is that at its core, what was really happening was a fear of the unknown. Video games weren't as understood or played by older generations as they are now. So, with the earlier stated concerns in mind, it makes sense that preventing kids from playing games is in a way preventing them from being exposed to risks we didn't quite understand yet. Therefore, we value too much the bad traits that could lead from playing video games. Now, you could argue that this claim disregards evidence showing the opposite. Yet I make this claim for the reason that as time has progressed we see more and more evidence favoring games as almost entirely harmless rather than harmful. While the effects of desensitization and other negative traits could be real, there are numerous studies suggest it most certainly isn't going to make your kid choose to do anything radical. Another reason for my claim is that we have to understand we are talking about research done 10 to 20 years ago. A lot of these children are adults by now, which makes for millions of real-life examples of people who proceed to live relatively normal lives while being exposed to violent video games. Yes, it is true that radical examples exist of attacks where video games gets mentioned as a cause or possible cause. But the world is filled with examples where this isn't the case. There are many examples of why a child could grow up to be aggressive, angry and without empathy. And while video games could be a factor, the more important question you should ask yourself is whether this is relatively relevant at all. In my opinion, this question is quite a silly one. And given that mentions of the media has been going down over the recent years, we are slowly moving on from it even at a societal level. The rise of gaming did bring, however, another concern into existence, one that we are failing to escape from more and more, which is the question of whether video games are addictive. The answer to this is a lot more concerning as a parent, and definitely good to be aware of. Because, simply put, yes, video games can be addictive. In fact, in 2013, Internet Gaming Disorder, or IGD for short, was added to the DSM-5 as a condition for further research. Video games are one of the most addicting technologies around, but it's also relatively easy to treat. Nevertheless, this is definitely a real problem, so I'll do my best to inform you as best as I can. Firstly, let's make a few distinctions here. When we speak of video game addiction, we are not talking about loot boxes or other gamble-like features. While they are most certainly a part of video games today, they fall more in line with gambling addiction. It is definitely an interesting topic to discuss, as well as the companies that implement these features to prey on young audiences' money. But no, we are talking about just games. The second distinction I want to make is that of substance addiction and video game addiction. While they use the same term, they are different in nature. Video game addiction is a behavioral addiction. This means that it causes detriment to life's others' responsibilities. There's no substance being consumed, and so there is no physical dependence being created. This causes treatment to be somewhat different. Whereas substance abuse gets treated with medical interventions or detoxification, gaming addictions focuses more on behavioral interventions and counseling. That being said, there has been neurological research done that shows similarities in changes in the brain between video game and addictive substances. How this exactly works has to do with neural structures in the brain. One you most certainly heard of is dopamine, and while this is incredibly interesting, it is not really relevant for the discussion today. Addiction is a term that can be applied to anywhere between stopping to clean your room to death itself. And so the connotation behind the term video game addiction can be under or over exaggerated if not understood well. So what exactly does it look like? Well, according to the DSM-5, the symptoms for video game addiction are the following. A preoccupation with gaming, withdrawal symptoms, a tolerance, an inability to reduce playing, giving up other activities, continuing to game despite problems, deceiving family members, the use of gaming to relieve negative moods, and risk having jeopardized or lost a job or relationship due to gaming. A diagnosis would require you to experience 5 of these traits within a year, though some of these factors are rather vague, hence why this disorder still has research ongoing today. The biggest question being asked is when passionate engagement turns to pathology. Is your child addicted or is he just very enthusiastic? Some researchers argue even that this disorder or addiction isn't a problem in and of itself, but rather a consequence of underlying problems like depression or anxiety. There are definitely lots of questions regarding this subject that we don't have solid answers for. So, how should you handle this as a parent? There are, of course, many ways to prevent a child from getting an addiction, none of which are without their own flaws and all of which are situational. I'd like to emphasize again that this video does not act as advice. A study ran on just under 1,000 participants showed that the most effective approach of prevention was to, quote, typically include educational and public awareness campaigns including recommendations about accessibility, like removing devices from the bedroom. Hong Kong, for example, has widely employed a program to increase awareness of the potential harms or excessive gaming and to promote moderate use and engage in physical exercise. Another study, however, suggested that removing devices from bedrooms could do more harm than good. Their suggestion was to set a time limit on the child. And yet another study suggests that any form of shutdown is outright ineffective and more relevant for gambling-related addictions. They stated that shutdown strategies usually share some form of opposition of the child. Nobody likes their hobbies taken away from them after all. Another ineffective strategy seems to be over-monitoring of the child. Gaming often acts as escapism, and therefore should be met with a sense of privacy. Now, getting involved isn't bad, and it might be very beneficial to show your child that you are interested in their hobby. But there is a time for everything. So a child should get to play without a looking eye over their shoulder too. That being said, the most important factor across all studies appears to be education on the effects of gaming for both the child and the parent, as well as fostering other interests in the real world. Now, this can be achieved by a parent setting a good role model example for the child. Now, we've discussed a lot already. And with these concerning negatives and risks factors at play, you might be saying to yourself that learning about all this behavior isn't worth it. And I could just as well deny my child from playing video games. And while that most certainly is an option that would prevent your child from gaining any negative stimuli from gaming, it would also remove your child from experiencing the vast amount of positives video games have to offer. To understand the value video games bring is truly impossible to boil down into a single video. Which is good for me really, because that means it's hard for me to run out of content to make. The vast scope of gaming in mainstream population has exceeded millions. When we speak of gaming, we speak of a billions market. My belief has it that once you understand just how huge gaming is, it becomes easier to understand that this also leads to great minds making use of that by developing games that blow players away with the most interesting stories and experiences that can't be replicated by books or movies. At a surface level, people often choose to play a game because it helps them unwind. It fills in time, it helps them escape, or maybe they like to use their brain to solve a problem or think logically for a moment. But taken one step deeper, we see a vast amount of other positive traits that can develop in a child as a result of video game play. It helps them develop general cognitive skills. It enhances reaction time and hand-eye coordination. It serves to help their memory, their multitask abilities, their creativity and spatial awareness, and many more traits. Not to mention social aspects. With so many people playing video games, it's a great tool to stay in touch with friends or even meet new friends all over the world. Most research was actually caused precisely by parental concerns regarding their child's development, of their time spent playing video games in a given week. To quote just a few papers on the positive aspects, we can take this study for example done by researchers at Columbia's University School of Public Health. After adjusting for child age, gender and number of children, the researchers found that high video game usage was associated with a 1.75 times the odds of high intellectual functioning and 1.88 times the odds of high overall school competence. There were no significant associations with any child self-reported or mother or teacher reported mental health problems. The researchers also found that more video game playing was associated with less relationship problems with their peers. Based on parent reporting, 1 in 5 children played video games more than 5 hours per week. Another example would be this research, led by Dr. Cherani, a PhD research professor at the University of Vermont. He found the following. The researchers found that the children who reported playing video games for 3 or more hours per day were faster and more accurate on both cognitive tasks than those who never played. They also observed that the differences in cognitive function observed between the two groups was accompanied by differences in brain activity. Functional MRI brain imaging analysis found that children who played video games for 3 or more hours per day showed higher brain activity in regions of the brain associated with attention and memory than those who never played. At the same time, those children who played at least 3 hours of video games per day showed more brain activity in frontal brain regions that are associated with more cognitively demanding tasks and less brain activity in brain regions related to vision. You might be wondering how all of this is possible, and that question too is hard to simplify. In essence, video games are incredibly rewarding tools. Imagine going for a run. You do this not because you want to, but because you value its healthy benefits. You run around the block for 30 minutes and once you're home you get rewarded with exhaustion. Now imagine you go on a run, but every time you do so, the streets turn into a new story or adventure. All of your friends start to join you and you can compete or cooperate with each other for all sorts of reasons. And every so often you get rewarded with money or a badge for your efforts. At first, you ran not because you wanted to, but you valued the benefits. But now you find yourself doing it out of curiosity for what adventure awaits you next. For a sense of achievement, or for great competition between friends and players all around the world. 30 minutes can become hours, and you won't even realize you're benefiting from it anymore. You are just doing it out of sheer excitement now. Look, for those unaware the value of games, it's hard to understand it. But at the end of the day, that's okay. You don't need to understand it. In fact, you can choose to stay deliberately ignorant. And that's fine too. I believe that if a child is enacting any hobby that you don't quite understand, it's likely a good idea to get informed. The evidence most certainly seems to suggest so. And it definitely doesn't seem like a good idea to act on the negative when you don't quite understand the positive. The best thing you can do regarding any topic is to educate yourself. That doesn't just go for this video either. I try to give information as unbiased as I can before I add my personal beliefs into the mix. But I still want to encourage you to seek out as much information as you can. Video games for most children are just another hobby. And while there is a vast amount of research out there regarding this subject, I'd simply suggest to just let them enjoy themselves. It most certainly worked for me. That being said, I hope this video was somewhat informative. Leave a like and subscribe if you're so kind to me. I'm Jeeves, and I hope to see you in the next video.